I've been getting a lot of questions about the market here in Ocean City recently, specifically whether it is picking up steam or if it is going to slow down. So, in today's video, I'm going to take you through what we've seen so far in April. Compare that back not only to last month, which was a record month, our strongest one in 3 years, but also looking back at previous Aprils and looking at different trends and patterns to figure out exactly where we are and what we should expect coming up. So let's get right to it. Right off the bat, what I can tell you is that April is looking way more like the months we've seen previous to March, more so than what we actually saw last month. Last month was crazy. This month is going to look like a massive slowdown. But you can look at it one of two ways. It's either a massive slowdown or last month was a complete anomaly. Based on what I'm seeing, I'm inclined to say that last month was an anomaly. Not only do we have the most new listings that we've seen in 3 years in a single month, we also accordingly had the most homes go under contract as we've seen in 3 years. This month, we have seen our new listings so far take a step back, but we've also seen our demand and our homes going under contract take a larger step back. It's not a one for one. Last month, that increase was pretty much across the board with listings and homes going under contract. It was a pretty even ratio. This month, it's a little skewed, so demand has slowed down. I think that has a lot to do with not only our rising mortgage rates. Here it says they're flat, but that's just at this point in time, I'm looking at it, they're flat compared to the beginning of the month. But just last week, rates were actually a little bit higher, and there's a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty, and it's caused a lot of buyers, in my opinion, to push pause. So inventory is up 4% from the beginning of the month, up to 246. We're up even a little bit more, now to 250 the day I'm recording this. Days on market, though, is still pretty stable. And obviously, you're going to see here, if this is your first time looking at one of these, I'll try to fill you in without repeating too much for those of you who do watch these each time they come out. But days on market has been rising slowly over the better part of the last year or so, but we're still way below where we were pre-2020, which I think is a fair measuring stick. That's when things were quote unquote normal. And we've been in a whole new world for the last 5 years. Prices for condos seem to be going up again, at least based on the numbers we're looking at. And single families, they're starting to level out. So, new listing wise, right, we've fallen off a cliff from last month to this month. Yes, we are only halfway through. It could certainly change, but that's typically not what happens. We usually have a pretty even pace throughout the month of April. March, however, was again an anomaly. And I don't expect that to reverse course where we see this big wave of new listings. I think that was kind of a one off. Now, pending sales, right, we are way down compared to last month, but all things considered, yes, we are lower, or at least on pace to be lower than last year and previous Aprils as well, which were fairly consistent, which again tells me that, yes, last month was an anomaly because really looking at January and February, they're down compared to normal Januaries and Februarys too. So I think we are having a slower year, all things considered. Last month being a complete fluke. Um, and I do anticipate that that continues. I expect that we'll see more months like this going forward. Closed sales, again, this is a reflection more of what happened last month. It's a lagging metric, so I don't focus too much on this, but strong month in terms of what is going to be closing in April. Now, single family homes, right? These months of inventory typically rise going backwards if you look backwards, but starting in March, right? They really take off and then they start to come back down. We didn't see that. Does that mean that we have finally achieved balance in the single family market? I kind of think we have. It's not to say that prices aren't still going to be extremely high for single family homes. They are. But I think our supply levels have evened out. Development levels have evened out. I think we've kind of reached a balance here. And we can see some of that in this pricing, right? For the better part of the last 6 months, if you draw a straight line across, it's pretty flat. That has happened in the past and then only to rise again in the near future. So again, please don't read me saying this as we've peaked, right? We're at the plateau. We've just achieved some balance. Where it goes from here is anybody's guess, but these sales are still pretty strong. There's still people in these price points who have the means to buy what they want when they want to buy it. The volume may not be there, right? We're not selling hundreds of these homes, but we're selling enough. So days on market for singles, yes, again, higher than they have been for the past few years, but I think, we're back to normalcy here. For condos, it's a little bit of a different story. For the first time in a very long time, we've actually peaked just above that 5 months of inventory mark, which is still a seller's market. I would expect that this stays and hovers around this 5 months of inventory for at least the next few months. Could you make an argument that yes, it's going to rise and hit 6? It All it would take would be one slow month in terms of condos where we have way more listings than we do condos going under contract to change that story. But I don't think this is going to become a buyer's market in the coming months. That's for sure. And as we look at these, right, the median sale price and the mean is telling the same story, continues to rise. And what I'm seeing with some of these 3-bedroom homes and what they're going under contract quickly for, right? We're talking first floors, several blocks off from the beach, listing at about 1.2 and going under contract in a few days. That has been unheard of, right? In the history of 3-bed, 2-bath duplex units in Ocean City. But here we are seeing that in what is our slowest market that we've had in quite a while. So I think the demand again is still out there for people who want what they want. And that has always been the case and will always be the case here in Ocean City. Days on market, right? Still very reasonable for condos. Now you're seeing those last 3 months hovering around 50 because I'm still waiting on a lot of homes to actually be closed out in the MLS. Only when that happens does the data flow through to where I can pull it accurately to say, okay, for sure, our days on market for the homes that sold in February, in March, were blank. And once that happens, this will probably even out a little closer to those mid 50 ranges, which again tells the story that homes are sitting a little bit longer and have been for the better part of the last 2 years. Now, speed, we're getting back to a slowness in terms of, again, speed is looking at the how many new listings do we need for one home to go under contract. Typically, we hover around 1.75. This is a good bit above 2 if we stay on pace over the second half of the month. And that typically is not so much the case for April. Usually have a little bit more going on this time of year. Now, whether it's, I've had friends of mine, agents, are saying it's the bad weather, right? We've had some terrible weather over the weekends. We haven't had people down. I think that's the easy thing to point to, but I think the bigger picture here is that a lot of buyers simply one of two things, right? I do have buyers who want something that simply doesn't exist on the market. We haven't seen them in 6 to 8 months at least. So we're waiting and they exist. And when it comes, they're ready. But I think there are more buyers who are simply looking around at the big picture, looking at the level of uncertainty everywhere and saying, hey, do we really need to do this right now? What's the worst case scenario if we wait a year, if we wait until there is a little bit more comfort, until I'm sure my job's secure, whatever it may be? I think that's more likely what's holding people back. Now, again, these trend lines for the 6 and 12-month averages for speed still hovering around that 1.75, 1.8. Could it start to creep up to 2? It certainly could. And that would tell us that, again, the market is slowing down across the board. Now, what should we expect going forward? Mortgage rates are going to be a little bit all over the place. Our 10-year Treasury yield, which is the closest metric compared to what's going to happen with the mortgage rates, what we look at to see where they're going, has been all over the place. It was down, it cracked under 4 for the first time in a couple years for about a day or two, and then it shot back up to 4.5. I don't know what's going to happen here. Jerome Powell came out, the Fed chair came out yesterday basically saying, hey, we're not ready to intervene, right? We're not going to be cutting rates. There's going to be more inflation because of tariffs than anticipated. But despite all that, they're just going to sit on their hands and keep watching. So we shouldn't expect any intervention, which I've been saying the entire year so far. We shouldn't expect them to do anything, at least in the first half of the year. They are data dependent. They're going to wait until they see a pattern. And usually they wait too long. That's their history. Until they're sure they're not making an error. But sometimes when they wait too long, it's too late to help, and it doesn't really do what they wanted it to do. So I think mortgage rates should pretty much, again, bounce around where we are now in the mid sixes. I don't anticipate that we would end up approaching 8 again. Could we crack 7%? It's possible, but very volatile times. So we'll keep a close eye on it. Inventory wise, it's normal. Same time last year, we actually had 5% more inventory. So again, it's sometimes hard to look beyond where we are now. Something may feel slow. It may feel like homes are sitting for a really long time. And then we looked just a year ago and we actually had more sitting out there. So again, I think last month was a fluke. All the demand that was out there, maybe some of it was pulled forward from who would normally buy in April. It's really hard to put a finger on. But what we can say is that we are on track to see a 35% drop in new listings from last month, which is massive. And we're on track to see fewer new listings than we saw in April of last year as well. So again, there's a little bit of a mixed message going on. if we look at the new listings decrease compared to the pending going under contract decrease, we're on pace to see a 60% drop from last month. So again, like I said at the start of this video, it's not really an apples to apples drop or a one for one drop. So it's a little bit confusing right now, but I do expect inventory to keep rising. And traditionally, in a normal year, we see inventory rise through June. Maybe it'll peak late June or early to mid July. Before then, it starts to go back down again. So I do expect that to stay consistent. I do expect to see that. We'll probably peak maybe 270, 275. And yes, that is a pure speculation based off of how much we have risen in years past, right? Anything could change, but I feel pretty good about that. And prices, as long as inventory is not going to be rising again, that 300 mark is still my benchmark for when I expect there to be enough pressure that the bulk of these sellers start to feel some pain and would potentially decrease the price more than they want to in order to sell their homes. I don't expect it to really happen. So prices, again, I expect it to basically stay where they are. There's still a lot of sellers who are feeling very confident, very comfortable. Some of the negotiations I've been in with buyers making offers, some of the responses that I've seen sellers make are extremely bold. They're very confident with where they are and where things stand. And as much as, I love to present data, say, well, hey, if you didn't get any other offers during the busiest month that we've had in the market in over 3 years, maybe that confidence isn't quite warranted. But unfortunately, emotions do play a very, very large part in this for a lot of people. So time will tell. It's on a case by case basis. So I think my message at the end of this really is if you're out there looking to buy something, don't be discouraged by the prices that are out there. Don't be discouraged if you want to make an offer on a home that's asking more than you think it's worth. You would be surprised. Again, this is an individual case by case basis for these sellers. We don't know who's going to be confident and hold the line versus who actually has some motivation. Maybe they don't want to drop the price because a lot of people have this drilled into their heads, right? If we want to list our home, if we actually want $1 million, we should go out there at 1 million too, because everybody is going to offer less than the asking price. But what can happen, right, is nobody offers anything because you're overpriced. Nobody's going to think that you have this backwards strategy. If you want $1 million, ask for $1 million. That's how it should work. But unfortunately, again, there's a lot of gamesmanship that gets played in our world, and it's not always beneficial to the one playing the game, thinking it's going to help. So if you do like a home and you see something you want to take a shot at, I would encourage you to take a shot. There are strategies that I have that have been very successful over the years to make that first pass have a higher chance of engaging us in a meaningful conversation with the seller to really see where they're at versus just getting an outright rejection. It does still happen sometimes, but I've got some good systems in place and experience to help us make it happen. So if you do want some help getting in before Memorial Day or by the summertime, feel free to reach out to me any of the ways you see here. And if you're looking to sell, right, this is kind of that awkward time where if you're going to sell now, we are heading into the end of the spring season where buyers will just say, you know what, let's just wait till the fall. There are still plenty of people who are going to be buying, always are. But if you want to get one more summer in, there are strategies that you can take to do that while also trying to get some security by getting your home under contract maybe during the summer, not closing until the end of the summer. So we can always talk through that as well. But I think it's going to be a very interesting rest of the month. I'm excited to bring you a video wrapping all this up to see where we landed here in a couple weeks. But again, reach out anything you need, any of the ways you see here. Always available to help. Happy to point you in the right direction. But thank you as always for hanging out. I'll see you next time.